The poor girl sat at the edge of the restaurant table, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of the water glass. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her older sister, the glamorous one with perfect hair and the confidence to match, had begged her to fill in just this once. "He's just a boring blind date, please. I can't make it tonight." And so she came, dressed in her sister's borrowed dress that didn't quite fit and shoes that pinched her toes. When the waiter led her to the corner table, she saw him, the man she thought would barely notice her. But he looked up, his deep brown eyes softening the instant they met hers, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. He smiled politely and said, "You must be Anna." She froze, guilt clawing at her chest, but before she could explain, he gestured for her to sit. "I'm glad you came," he added quietly. There was something lonely in his tone that made her heart ache. She didn't plan to lie. She only wanted to explain that her sister couldn't make it, that this was a mistake. But when he started talking, about his daughter, about how hard it was balancing work and parenting, something about his honesty disarmed her. He wasn't like the arrogant men her sister usually met. His laughter was quiet, genuine, and his words were full of care. He told her he hadn't been on a date in years because he didn't trust easily, and she, for some reason, couldn't bring herself to shatter that fragile smile by admitting who she really was. Every time she tried to tell the truth, he looked at her with such sincerity that she lost her nerve. It was supposed to be an hour-long dinner, but hours passed like minutes. When the waiter brought dessert, he noticed her flinch at the bill. "You don't like sweet things?" he asked kindly. She shook her head, mumbling, "I just don't usually eat somewhere like this." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled softly. "You're different," he said. "You actually listen." That simple line made her chest tighten. No one had ever said that to her before. Her sister was the one who dazzled, who charmed, who always got attention. But tonight, she was the one sitting across from a man who looked at her as if she mattered. When the date finally ended, she stood, fumbling with her purse, desperate to escape before her truth spilled out. "Thank you for the dinner," she whispered. "You're leaving already?" he asked, a hint of sadness in his tone. I should." She started to walk away, but then he said something that froze her in place. "You remind me of someone." She turned, startled. "Who?" He smiled faintly. "My wife. She used to talk with her hands the same way." Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," he replied softly. "It's been a long time since I felt peace like this." She almost told him everything right then, that she wasn't Anna, that she was just the sister who worked at the laundry and had no right to sit at that fancy table. But before she could speak, his phone buzzed. "It's my daughter," he said, answering. She watched the way his face softened, how his voice turned tender. "Yes, sweetheart, Daddy's coming home soon," he said. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. He wasn't just a CEO. He was a father, a man carrying pain beneath his composure. When he hung up, he looked at her again and said quietly, "You know, I wasn't sure I'd come tonight, but I'm glad I did." She smiled faintly, trying to mask the ache in her heart. "Me too," she whispered. He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded napkin with his number on it. "If you'd ever like to talk again," he said, "I'd like that." She took it with trembling fingers, knowing she'd never have the courage to call. As she turned to leave, he stopped her. "Wait!" His tone had changed, softer but commanding. "Something tells me you're not who you say you are." Her pulse quickened. "Well, what do you mean?" He stood slowly, his gaze steady but gentle. "Anna would never look at me the way you do," he said simply. "So who are you, really?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. She couldn't run. She couldn't lie. The truth was written all over her trembling hands. "I'm her sister," she whispered finally. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, instead of anger, a quiet smile spread across his face. "Good," he said, "because for the first time in years, I felt something real tonight." The next morning, she woke with a heavy heart, replaying every second of the night before. She knew she had made a mistake, pretending, staying silent, falling into the warmth of a conversation that wasn't meant for her. She went to her part-time job at the small neighborhood bakery, hoping the sweet scent of fresh bread would drown out the guilt. But her hands trembled as she arranged pastries on the counter. Every time the bell above the door chimed, she looked up, half expecting to see him, the man who had looked at her like she was something precious. It was foolish, she told herself. A CEO wouldn't come looking for a girl who couldn't even afford proper shoes. But as fate would have it, the bell rang one last time, and there he was. He stood at the entrance, tall and composed, his suit out of place amid the smell of sugar and flour. For a moment she thought she was imagining him. "You left too quickly last night," he said quietly. Her breath caught. You found me?" He smiled faintly. "You didn't make it that hard." "I asked your sister." Her stomach dropped. "She told you everything?" He nodded. "Enough to know you didn't come for money or attention. You came because you cared about someone else's feelings." His eyes softened as he stepped closer. "And I came because I care about yours." The other workers watched in silence as the billionaire walked to the counter and placed a coffee in front of her. "You forgot this last night," he said gently, setting down her scarf. It was such a small thing, but the way he did it, with quiet tenderness, made her eyes fill. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. "I embarrassed you." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You reminded me what honesty looks like." His tone carried no accusation, only understanding. "You were real when I needed someone real the most." She tried to smile, but her voice cracked. "You don't know me, Mr. Hale. You're a CEO and I'm—" "No one." He studied her, his gaze unwavering. "You're the first person in years who didn't treat me like a CEO," he said softly. "That's why I can't forget you." Her throat tightened as he continued. "I lost my wife 2 years ago. Everyone around me treats me like glass, afraid to remind me of her. But you didn't. You looked at me. Not the money, not the name, just me." His words wrapped around her heart like warmth in winter. She blinked back tears. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "People might think you've lost your mind." He smiled slightly. "Maybe I have. Or maybe I finally found something that feels right." She didn't know what to say. The bakery was silent except for the hum of the coffee machine and the soft rain beginning to fall outside. He looked at her then, really looked, and said quietly, "Have dinner with me." "Not as your sister. As yourself." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You'd still want to?" "Especially now," he said. "Because I don't want perfect. I want real." She hesitated, her mind spinning with fear and longing. "People will talk," she whispered. "Let them," he said simply. "They already talk about me. I'd rather give them something true to talk about." She laughed softly, unable to hide the flutter in her chest. He held out his hand, waiting. For a long moment she stared at it, at the symbol of everything impossible. Then with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. His grip was steady, certain. "Good," he said quietly. "Now I won't let you walk away again." As they stepped outside, the rain grew heavier, but neither of them moved to cover. They just stood there, a billionaire and a baker's assistant, both soaked, both smiling, as if the world had finally stopped demanding explanations. "You know," he said, glancing at her, "when I first saw you last night, I thought you were out of place. Now I realize you were exactly where you were meant to be." She looked up, her eyes glistening. "And where is that?" she asked softly. "Right here," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "With me